what's going on, guys? I'm FlynnMasters, and today I got a very interesting ranking video, as I'll be ranking the chefs with the most amount of nominations from their given season, from worst to best. And yeah, obviously a very specific niche type video here, but once it did get recommended to me, I did kind of find it interesting because, as you'll see, the chef with the most amount of noms ranged anywhere from an early-ish boot to a mid-game boot to a black jacket to even some winners, and thus I thought it would make for a very interesting ranking. And keep in mind, this is a talent ranking, not how I feel about them as chefs personally. And I will be looking a lot at these noms and how much they deserve to survive, or if they deserve those noms in the first place, along with my usual factors such as overall talent and their competition, etc., etc. And with that, let's get on into it with the clear worst, in my opinion, with that being Josh from season 3. Who is actually tied with Bonnie with 3 nominations. And so when it does come to ties, I'll choose the chef who reached the most amount of nominations first, as Josh's 3rd nomination came in episode 6, while Bonnie's 3rd came in episode 7. But yeah, really not much to discuss here, as Josh had 8 services in Hell's Kitchen, and none of them were really that good. And what really puts him over the top, for me at least, is the fact that he should have been nominated a 4th time instead of Brad, and of course the Black Jacket service was an all-time bad one. And that is why he is at the bottom of my list. At number 22 is Andrew from season 1, and pretty similar to Josh in that he was pretty bad in each service. But again, at least he went home when he should have, 6 services in, as opposed to Josh, who completely outstayed his welcome. And of course, you know, he was an actual chef compared to Josh. So yeah, it's not much, but at least to me, Andrew isn't quite as bad as Josh, in my opinion. At number 21 is one of the earlier boots on board, which is why he is this low, with that being Billy from Battle of the Ages. And yeah, he had an awful 2-part premiere, being nominated for the Chicken Wing Elimination Challenge, and of course after the first service. You know, and he wasn't in that much danger of going home, to be fair. And you know, why he was just kind of fine up until his elimination service, like it obviously was a pretty bad one. Right in the middle of one of the worst services of the new era. So while you could argue a lot of other chefs on this list made a lot more mistakes than Billy, that's mostly because, you know, they lasted longer and didn't struggle as much as Billy did out the gate. So that is why he lands here at number 21. At number 20, we actually go from an early boot to a finalist, with that being Virginia. And yeah, no need to beat the dead horse on this one. She had one good service in Hell's Kitchen and only made it as far as she did, due to being on arguably the worst cast in Hell's Kitchen history talent-wise. I mean, you could even argue she deserves to be below Billy, as I see no reason why Billy couldn't have been a finalist on season 2. But at the end of the day, due to her better resume, she is able to sneak her way just above Billy here at number 20. At number 19 is someone very similar to Virginia, with that being Elise, and once again won't be the dead horse here, as unlike so many other chefs on this list who were nominated for, you know, either BS reasons, or like were never in that much danger of going home, or like, you know, had an okay service compared to a great service, like Elise generally deserved pretty much all of her nominations, and was bad in plenty of other services as well. Now, again, I will admit that in most cases she deserved to survive, like even in questionable ones, like against Natalie and Elizabeth, like you could argue in Elise's favor. But yeah, just overall not a very good chef, which is why she's in my bottom 5. At number 18 is a chef who I like more than most, with that being Andy. And hey, while I love his fight, you know, that's why I like him more than most, is I love his fighting determination. There's a reason why he was always fighting, as he was a pretty inconsistent chef in Hell's Kitchen, to say the very least. Didn't have many standout moments, and was nominated in almost every opportunity he could be for, you know, very deserved reasons. And again, while not as bad as the other chefs below him in my opinion, just way too inconsistent to put much higher than 18. At number 17 is one of the worst final boots in the show's history, and is pretty low on this list, with that being Andrea. And yet, you know, she got off to a great start for sure in those first 4 episodes, but after episode 5 service, and it pretty much all went downhill from there. Now, again, always keep in mind with these early seasons, like there are more mistakes shown and more focus on Ramsay being Ramsay, because obviously he was at his peak around this time, and thus someone like Andrea might stand out more to me in the worst of ways. I mean, but regardless, you know, she was extremely lucky to make it to the final 3, and while I respect her fight, and I do think she deserved a black jacket, at least on this season, just way too inconsistent to be much higher than 17. At number 16 is the only other true early boot here, with that being Sandra, coming this season, of course, right after Billy, which again is the main reason why she is this high, as I could easily see her getting very far on a lot of other seasons. And heck, looking at her nominations this season, I mean, her first nomination, she literally got sent back in line by Ramsay. You know, he even said himself he was surprised she was up there. And while yes, her surviving over Melissa was very up in the air, her 3rd nomination, she was a 2nd nominee after a good overall service. The 4th nomination was a Cook for Your Life, and her 5th and final nomination came again on an overall great service. And she went home after literally making one mistake. It's just one of those unfortunate things. So yeah, you could truly make the argument she deserves to be even higher. But due to her still being an early-ish boot and damn near being the 4th boot of this season, like, I just can't put her much higher than 16, even though I really want to. We got two very similar cases here for 15 and 14, with number 15 being Zach. And yeah, we all know the deal by now. An amazing first half for Zach, but just an absolute dreadful second half, nominating every opportunity other than one from the final 12 on. His attitude got worse and just should have not have gotten all the way to 6th place. But you just cannot overlook how dominant he was in the first half, and that's enough to propel him relatively high here at number 15. At number 14 is Clemenza, and here's the thing, while he was never as dominant as Zach was, at least when it came to their highs in Hell's Kitchen, I don't think he was ever as bad as Zach was either when it came to the lows, other than like his first nomination service, where even then like the whole freaking service was on his shoulders. And the big thing is, I do believe he generally deserved to survive most of his nominations and make it to at least around where he ended up finishing. Like maybe, you know, he should have gone home over Robin or even Brian, but you know, as opposed to Zach, who you know was lucky to not be eliminated over the likes of Ray and Michael, much less freaking Anthony. So, and that's why he's just above Zach, despite both of them, you know, both of those two being pretty inconsistent chefs. At number 13 is the most recent chef to be added to this list, with that being Anne-Marie from Head Chefs Only in her 6 nominations. And Anna's an interesting case, as you could make the argument she could have easily gone home much earlier than she did. With even then, I mean, even then her 8th place finish is nothing amazing or anything. But again, what puts her over the likes of Clemenza and Zach for me is that she was obviously on a much more talented cast than those two. And her mistakes and bad services weren't nearly as noteworthy in my opinion. So I think overall 13 is a good spot for her. At number 12 is Barbie from All Stars, who I know wasn't great, but again, as the case with most chefs on this list in the middle tier, while she wasn't amazing, I think pretty much all her survivals were justified. And it's not like she even outstayed her welcome, finishing in 9th place. And again, while the All-Stars cast is awful personality-wise, I do think people sometimes forget how talented this season was. So her finishing that far isn't even that bad, especially when, again, I think she deserved to get as far as she did. So yeah, to me, Barbie's running All-Stars is perfectly encapsulates middle tier ranking when it comes to this list. At number 11 is someone similar to Zach, but their downfall wasn't nearly as bad as Zach's, with that being Wendy. And again, from the final 13 to her elimination at the final 8, she was nominated in 5 of the 6 rounds. But again, she was never in danger of going home during her first 2 nominations on the red team. And yeah, while her run on the blue team wasn't great at all, to say the very least, like, for God's sakes, the likes of Johnny's and the Johnny's and Polly's of the world just hated her for existing. Like, it just, for me, it just kind of feels wrong to penalize her too much for that. So, you know, while you could argue that she deserves to be lower, I think, you know, her time on the blue team warrants at least a little bit of a break, which is why she lands here at number 11. And now on to the top 10. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, but I do have Josh in my top 10. And I admit, I just got done watching this season, and he was a lot worse on his downfall than I remembered. And like I've said a million times, him surviving over Randy and Allison is just insane. But regardless, I do think he was overall pretty damn good up until like the final 10ish or so. And hey, he was competing with literally the best chefs in Hell's Kitchen history this season. So while, yeah, he was pretty outclassed by them, I do think he hanged in there at least somewhat decently with some of the best chefs to ever enter Hell's Kitchen. And that's the main reason why he is able to sneak his way into my top 10. At number 9 is someone very similar to Josh, and that is the person with the most amount of nominations from the season before his, with that being Ro. And while Ro is pretty consistent, here's the thing: she deserved to survive all of her nominations, in my opinion. Maybe like the only one you could argue is Santos, but like regardless, she still deserved her black jacket. And you know, she did make her fair share of mistakes throughout the season, but it was nothing ever egregious, in my opinion. And again, season 13 was a very talented season, and while not as talented as 14, of course, I do think Ro was just simply a bit better and more deserving of black jacket than Josh was, which is why she lands just above him at number 9. At number 8, I think might be my most controversial placement. Well, I mean, I don't know, because I know a lot of people why they don't like this person. They do respect with that being Sabrina. And a reason for that respect is that despite being such a villain this season, even the biggest of Sabrina haters have to admit that a lot of her nominations were for completely unjustified reasons. And not only that, but like she had some flat out standout performances and was essentially flawless from the final 10 on, up until her elimination, of course. Again, her start was pretty bad though, and if Louis wasn't just a complete train wreck in Service 4, she damn near probably would have been early boot. And of course, you know, she was on an awful season talent-wise. But despite all those negatives, I think just her general performance this season is overall good enough to warrant her number 8 spot in my ranking. At number 7 is Manda from season 15, who I will admit wasn't flawless in her services, even outside of being nominated. Like a lot of chefs on this list were only bad during their nominations. And, you know, in fact, she should have been nominated instead of Vanessa after the 3rd service. and could have been in potential danger. But like, she was only nominated 3 times up until her elimination round at the Black Jackets, which again, compared to most other chefs on this list who made it that far with like 6 or 7 nominations, it's simply such an advantage in her favor. And is just generally a good and deserving Black Jacket chef. So while maybe not as many highs as some of the other chefs even below her, the fact that Amanda was only nominated 4 times all season, and yet that was the highest amount in season 15, is really what propels her to my number 7 spot. At number 6 is another controversial placement, I'm sure, but I do think Mark is a pretty damn good chef. I mean, his first 2 nominations, he didn't do much of anything wrong. It was just simply the outcasted second nominee. His 3rd nomination was due to Cook for Your Life. And while yes, his last 2 services and subsequent nominations were really bad, like, that was really the worst he did all season. And considering just how generally solid he was on an all-time talented season, I think, when you combine all that together, I do think 6 is an appropriate spot for him. On to the top 5, and at number 5 is Autumn from season 7. Of course, the first person to be nominated the record 7 times in a season, which 4 other chefs have since tied her. And, with Autumn, though, I feel like she was the one of the more, of course, obviously with being this high, I feel she's one of the most talented out of the group, as her first 2 nominations on the red team were mostly because the group didn't like her. And once she made the switch to the blue team, she was really damn good up until her last 2 services on that team, which were admittedly pretty bad and could have got her sent home had, Fran and Siobhan not been complete train wrecks. But I still think, she is a deserving Black Jacket, at least on that season. And her remaining 3 nominations were, she was simply put up because the Black Jackets viewed her as the weakest of the group. So overall, while not a perfect chef by any means, I think Autumn is an underrated chef in the grand scheme of things, which is why she's in my top 5. At number 4 is someone who I would have a lot lower, to say the very least, if this was a character ranking. But as a chef, I do think is very solid, with that being Jose from Rookies vs. Veterans. And the thing was, after a bad first service, where to be fair, he wasn't even nominated by his team, he was extremely solid. And again, his other nominations came during the Cook for Your Life. In the final 9, where again, he was an original nominee. He was nominated by Ramsay. So, and even though he did have the worst charity night service ever, again, you could argue, he had done better than Trev and would have survived, at least throughout the season, and would have survived under different circumstances and potentially been a Black Jacket. So yeah, while a complete douche at times to the mentioned Trev, overall, I gotta admit, a very solid chef, and that's why he lands here at number 4. At number 3 is someone who might be surprised is high, because, spoiler alert, the top 2 are winners, and this person is a mid-game boot. But I do have Josie, and to me, she just never had any truly bad, disastrous moments or awful services like a lot of the other chefs we talked about so far. And she was never in that much danger of going home in the 5 times she was nominated. She was usually the second nominee, and it took going home again. It took going up against Liddy Steve for her to go home, for God's sakes. Not to mention, she of course was on an insanely talented season, and I could easily see her getting a Black Jacket on most other seasons. If not this season, had again she not been up against Steve. She just happened to be up against him on one of his only bad nights in Hell's Kitchen. So for when you combine all those reasons, I do think she deserves to be this high at number 3. The top 2 spots, like I said, are winners, and it's just a matter of ordering them, with the weaker of the 2, in my opinion, being Christina. And yeah, I've been very low on Christina as a winner, but for God's sakes, as talented as the likes of Jose and Josie are, at the end of the day, they didn't win, and Christina's a freaking winner, and deservedly so for that matter. Why I think Petrosia should have won. I think she's obviously a damn good chef in the grand scheme of things, but just not as good as the other winner on the list. But at number 1, the other winner is Scott. And while I love Scott, I have been lower on him than others I know. As well, again, he's the best leader to ever be on the show. People forget how inconsistent. I feel like people sometimes forget how inconsistent he was. Because people always say yeah, he just didn't deserve to be nominated like half those times, which is true. But at the same time, he also was inconsistent outside of the times he wasn't nominated. But at the end of the day, come on, there's a reason why he is a Hell's Kitchen winner at the end of the day. And, what puts him over Christina for me is just being a bit better performer overall. And of course, obviously much better and bigger competition on the 20-person cast in season 12. So, pretty easy here. Scott is the best chef with the most amount of nominations on his season. So there you have it, guys. My ranking of every chef in Hell's Kitchen history with the most amount of nominations from their given season. Let me know what you think of this list and video in general, and be sure to hit that subscribe and like button to support the channel. And with all that said, take care everyone, and I'll see you next time.